I can. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you so much for bringing us all together here. We thank you for the lessons that you teach us day by day. We pray that you will help us to open our hearts and open our eyes to understand and accept the lessons that you're teaching us. We pray that you will help us to have an open heart, an open mind, and allow ourselves to be changed and molded. We thank you for these tests and these trials. We also would like to ask for your help as we go into this test, this study on gender and sexism. And we pray that you will be here with us. Help us all to be in a good spirit, open mind, open heart. Help us to learn, to listen, to understand. We praise you, Lord. We thank you for this Sabbath. And we pray all this in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Okay, let's see here.
So, Elaine, before we keep going, is the recording still going from the first one? Or did you restart it?
That was what I said thank you for. I'd have to wear my editing hat because for that too, because I stopped it and now I started it again.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm usually, I guess I was that engrossed in the discussion because I'm automatic when we close in prayer to shut it off.
Yeah, I totally get it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna take a moment. Susan sent me a really good article that's gonna be great for next week. And I wanna make sure I get it in there. Let me see here. Okay, so we're gonna get back to our sexism study. We're leaving gender off for just a second, just to thoroughly finish going through. Well, you can't leave gender because it's part of sexism. So, but specifically, some other parts of sexism that we're gonna look the more subtle forms. And next week, I want us to go into gender. So just look at gender identities, gender stereotypes, anything around gender, because as we saw last night in Elder Tess's presentation, hold on, let me turn this. As we saw last night in Elder Tess's presentation, the LGBTQ issue has to do with sexism, and it's involved in there and how gender stereotypes work. So for next week, I want us to go into that because it is going to come out soon. And the more that we kind of know how that operates, the better it's going to be and the easier it's going to be. So I hope that's all right. But with that, does anyone have anything else to share besides the things that we're going to read in here? Because I only have 4 articles, so we might be getting done earlier today. We'll see what happens. But did anyone else find anything interesting that they wanted to share? Remember, this is group talk time.
I posted a gender test in the teacher's chat. It's actually a test for all kinds of biases. I took one of the tests. I don't know, it's one of those, I don't know if any of you took Natalie's test, Sister Natalie from What's Up, probably about 6 months ago. She posted a test to see if you had racial biases. And it's a test like that, if any of you tried her test. But I thought that was kind of interesting because it does show your how your brain is wired sometimes from some of these things just being so ingrained in you through your life that you don't maybe recognize that you have a bias. You think you don't, but you kind of do. And so I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's actually going to be in at least one of the articles that we're going to read today, those tests. Because people take a test. Okay, I see where it is. People don't think that it's so ingrained, but it like one of the articles today said that it just how you're brought up leaves a thumbprint on your subconscious. And
Yeah, I
it's really-
liked that. That was a good explanation. The
yeah,
thumbprint. Yep.
yeah, it was really good, and I thought it was really interesting. So also, like a lot of the articles that we read in the movement and that get posted, like Elder Tess said, we don't always believe with everything that they say in there, and some of the people, the authors' private views. But for these, there's one where one of the authors starts going into the lizard brain thing. So I highlighted that area. It's just a thing, to know that we're just focusing on the main points that fit with our message here, okay? So we're going to start off with, unless someone else has anything else to share, we're going to start off with this article, Sexism by Women Against Other Women. And then we're going to also go into, I have 2 articles on that, and then I have 2 articles on how sexism affects men as well. And we're going to go into those 2. So let's go back here. And Elaine, I never got that thing that you shared. I couldn't find it in the emails. I went back to the Monday and Wednesday study nights and I couldn't find them in the emails. So if you do find it, you could put it in chat. Okay. So sexism by women against other women, violence by another name. Let's see. My preoccupation with how women compete with one another, here labeled sexism, is born out of a profound sense of frustration. Despite the emergence of the Me Too movement and numerous allegations against prominent men, CEOs, movie stars, journalists, athletes, and even the President of the United States, nothing seemed to shake women's preference for male leadership. J. Newton Small's recent article in the Washington Post shows low poll numbers for every female candidate running for the Democratic Party's 2020 presidential nomination. In May, only 2 of the 6 women who declared consistently poll at or near 5%. Senators Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, 2 older white male candidates led by wide margin, more than 50%. Why is this the case? Why is it that even women seem to prefer men over more accomplished women candidates? Why do women find it so hard to support another woman seeking a higher position than their own? At the root of this issue is sexism by women against other women. We must look inward to interrogate the socially approved forms of violence in our lives. At the same time, we cannot limit our analysis to individual shortcomings. On Wednesday between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., the only Black-owned radio station in Rochester, New York, invited residents to call in and ask a lawyer's advice. One spring morning, I was struck by the pain in the voice of the first caller, whom I identified as an African-American woman in her late 30s. She said that she and her brother had started arguing during dinner at their mother's house. The escalating tension made her mother so uncomfortable that she called the police. The caller said that when the cops arrived, they told her mother that in order to keep the adult children from being arrested, she would have to ask one of the children to leave. The caller, heartbroken, she recounted how, unlike her brother, she takes her mother to medical appointments at the grocery store, reminds her mother when to take her blood pressure medication, among others, calls nightly to make sure her mother is safe and has locked the doors and turned off the lights. Her brother, the caller insisted, did none of these things. The caller asked the lawyer to help her understand why her mother would treat her as though she were the child who did nothing. The lawyer and the DJ were silent. This kind of silence is not meant for radio. Neither of them on air would say what was obvious. Women are socialized to value the child who, by virtue of their gender, provides the greatest sense of security and protection. My most recent ethnographic study, let me change this. My most recent ethnographic study at a suburban school chronicles a similar pattern of sexism by women. Nadine and Keisha, two Black girls in the same graduating class, were BFFs until they were not. Keisha, the most middle class of the two, began dating Nadine's boyfriend, Kyle, without her knowledge. When Nadine learned of this violation, she terminated her relationship with Keisha. School officials were even compelled to assign Nadine to a different section of their shared English class. This estrangement lasted for almost an entire year until they agreed to have lunch together in the school cafeteria. They chose not to sit at the quote-unquote Black table, instead opting to an unoccupied table. They left their books and book bags and went to get snacks from the designated area. When they returned, a group of white girls were standing near the book bags and told Keisha and Nadine that they could not sit at that table because referencing themselves as a segment of the school's cheerleaders sit there every day. Nadine invoked a legal argument. No one can claim proprietary rights in the school's cafeteria. This is a public communal space, no private property. No one seemed to hear her. But the moment the tall, willowy blonde white girl says the words N-word and B-word in the same sentence, everyone hears it. Nadine is chilled to the bone. Her sense of shame and humiliation is too much to bear. With her right hand, she reaches up. The girl who uttered the slur is taller, and with every ounce of strength she can muster, she slaps Kristen, her antagonist, full across the face. Her hand stings. She notices her handprint on both sides of Kristen's face, interrupted by only her nose, which turns from pink to beet red to splotchy purple. Tears well up in her eyes. She cries silently at first, then convulses with sobs. Adults arrive. An assistant principal orders Nadine immediately to his office. Just like that, Nadine disappeared. No one heard from or saw her until she returned to school at the end of her 5-day suspension. Her graduation just around the corner and her need to take the appropriate regent exams were totally ignored. Sexism, a ubiquitous and misrecognized form of violence, constrains female agency and is violence because it causes injury to women. It is present in particular moments, but also in different contexts and over time. While I identified this as gender-specific competition and downed by friendly fire, Black girl, white girl, and suburban schooling, sexism is the appropriate term to describe women's preference for male leadership and how Black and white teenage girls learn to compete with each other as they begin the laborious process of putting into practice their versions of femininity. At this developmental stage, these girls' rudimentary practices are brutal. They discriminate against each other intra and intergroup in a war for male attention protection and the hegemonic contemporary courtship script that closely approximates the traditional marital one. You can't change what you don't acknowledge, so goes the old adage. Women have to stop misrecognizing sexism as the behaviors and practices of men alone. Our journey to transformation comes with the acknowledgement of our complicity in what appears to be the ultimate examples of banality, men protecting women. However, if we are committed to gender equality and social transformation, we must look inward to interrogate the socially approved forms of violence in our lives. At the same time, we cannot limit our analysis of individual shortcomings. We must also look outward and recognize that without considering the relentless durability of structural arrangements and violence embedded in the individual response, we will fail to achieve our idealized version of a democratic United States. Okay, any thoughts on that article? That had a lot in there, but it made some good points.
This was
Well,
this was
this-
the one that I thought I sent to you, but I guess I didn't.
Oh, well, there it is.
Yeah, because I read the same one.
Phil?
Yeah, this article just goes to show how deeply this sexism is ingrained in our brain. Ever since we are kids, children. We grow up in this this image that women are helpless and men are there to save them. Men are the better leaders. And, it's ingrained, and it's just difficult to get this out of our heads.
Yeah, and first off, we have two things here. So there's women leadership, and that's very ingrained, which there's another article talking about that. And then there's this, how did it call it? Competition, a gender specific competition. Oh, that was. So as far as leadership goes, I think the next article is going to go a little bit more in depth on women leadership and why it is that we have the issues with it that we do. But when it comes to gender specific competition, if your worldview is that women have to basically find a man and make babies, and the man is the one who does the providing and the buying things and the work and all of the protecting and everything, then a woman's survival, why do I spell so bad, it's dependent on a man. So man becomes the major goal for the woman. That's what all her education and all her upbringing for is, to understand how to interact with a man, how to serve a man, and how to provide children and take care of that man's children. And what this means is that the better male specimen is the one that women want. So there's going to be competition between women for this individual for survival reasons. And it turns into this kind of animalistic game competition thing. And it pits women against other women. And it causes an incredible amount of damage when that happens. So I just thought that that's a really important point of sexism, is gender specific competition.
Well, I have a question, and maybe it's kind of sounds stupid,
No.
but well, it might. How Phil was talking about Disneyland. Well, I was thinking about, all the stories, all the prince stories where, the prince comes to save you on the horse. But then think of the story of Jesus, because, he comes to save the church, right? And I've always pictured him coming, on that horse. And I have always thought that those Disney stories or whatever are just kind of counterfeits to the real truth. But now that we're understanding more about God not being any either male, no, he's both, but I don't know how to really put that in words. But so what is that story trying to teach us then, because Jesus does portray the shining knight coming to save us and rescue us at the end. Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, because of course with the quality message, Disney has gotten a lot of flack for portraying women always in that situation. That they're helpless and they have to be saved, but then in the Bible that's what the story is, right? So how do we
Yeah, so
understand
how
that?
do we understand that? Yeah.
Well,
Well, well, if I may, I think that's part of Apis bull.
yeah,
You
I
know,
was gonna say same.
we have this image of, this shining knight, Christ coming to the rescue. And because this is a patriarchal society, we have to fit that image of a shining knight. Just as Jesus comes to rescue his world, we got to come and rescue the women, because after all, it's women's fault, right? I mean, it's their, so I mean, it's her fault that we're in this mess. and now we got to save them, but we got to do this, right? So we have this brave man to save this helpless women, and maybe they don't deserve it because they started the whole sin, and so that turns around. Maybe we can lord over them now, and we can beat them, and it's the way the Hollywood. I mean, it's not just Hollywood's fault. It's like you said, the pastor's fault. We talked about earlier about Michael and David, and our pastor says, "Oh, David is good, Michael is bad." It's not just Hollywood. It's the whole mentality of the society, of the world, and it's terrible. Got it all wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And like Elder Tess said, that because of where people's minds were at the time when he first came to earth, he couldn't have come as a woman because of the people, not because, he didn't want to. It was just people barely accepted him the way he already was in a male form.
Right.
So no one would have been saved at all if it would have been a woman. And so that's part of it. And I think the giver
Yeah.
and receiver comes into it too in the explanation. When you
Right. I think if you like, what's her name? Joan of Arc. Right. If you look at her history, I think initially, she was heralded as a hero, and then later she got killed as a witch.
yeah.
So Jesus coming here as a woman, it would have just, nobody would have paid attention. Nobody would have listened.
Yeah. So again, God is limited by us and our willingness to understand. So a lot of, even in the New Testament with Paul and his sexism, it's in there. It's sexist. Even some of I think it was Elder Tess or Elder Perman, I can't remember which one, but we're talking about how in the prophecies the women are portrayed. It's a lot. It's everywhere. It's embedded in everything because that's where the mentality was at the time. And God is limited by our willingness to understand. And because we're stiff-necked and not willing to look at things from different perspectives, what can he do? I don't know if that helps, Susan.
Yeah, I know more will be revealed. The thought just came to me because that's on what you're talking about, and yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I like last night was amazing what Elder Tess showed with the chiasm. I mean, it's just, and I never would have thought of Cain and Abel and Sabbath and having that, you know what I mean? It's getting so much more clear, and we're going to have all the answers we need, but we just have to be patient and we have to hang in here. So yeah, Elaine says Elder Tess mentioned yesterday it took till 1800s and a female prophet. Yep. Okay, let's see here. Why are even women biased against women? So women are sexist too. Even avowed feminists are found to be unconsciously biased against women. In the Radio 4 program analysis, Marianne Seegart asks, where do these discriminatory attitudes come from and what can we do about them? So she mentions a weird thing about the lizard brain, but then she also mentioned another thing that has to do with conditioning. And that's the one that is more apt for our message. And we're going to focus on that one because it pretty much is what it is that's causing this. So women are assumed to be incompetent unless proven otherwise, and men are assumed to be competent unless proven otherwise. That's the observation of someone who has the rare experience of having lived both as a man and as a woman. Professor Joan Roughgarden, formerly of Stanford University, her experience as a transgender woman confirms what women have always suspected. They have to work twice as hard to prove that they're good at what they do. Why do women have lower expectations of other women? Catherine Nichols, a writer based in Boston, has firsthand experience. After she finished writing her novel, she sent out the first few chapters plus a synopsis to 50 literary agents, overwhelmingly female. I'm going to change the size of this. She had just 2 positive replies from agents asking to see more of the manuscript. Lana, are you saying this woman has a TED Talk thing? Because I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, I thought I did. There's a transgender lady. She had a very interesting story where, you know, she was telling her story from the perspective of a man first, and then she tells the story after the gender, you know, switch, and she, I mean, as a person who had experienced both sides, that was fascinating to hear from her because, you know, because you know, being confined to one gender in our, you know, in our state, we only learn about it from the outside, from the people that experience, right? For example, men learn about them being misogynists by learning from women, right? So they can't exactly see their misogyny. And the same way women, so, but this person, she had, I think, okay, let me see how, if I find that
You
TED.
find it, Donna?
I will try to find it.
That's there right there.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so that's there, and whoever has a chance later on, go ahead and check that out. Because the more you kind of expose yourself to this and this thought process, it helps you to understand the situation better. So thank you, Lana, for that. I am going, and Donna, I'm going to watch that later on. So again, this lady, she wrote a novel. She sent her manuscript off to 50 literary agents, all mostly women, and she only got 2 positive replies back. This puzzled her, as writer friends had told her how good her novel was. So she conceived what she called a nutty plan. She sent out exactly the same material to 50 more agents, but this time under a male name. The result? She had 17 positive replies. In other words, the mainly female agent seemed to think she was 8.5 times better at writing under a man's name than a woman's. What's more, she received loads of constructive criticism on how to improve the novel, help she never got when she was writing under a woman's name. It was shocking how fast it became obvious there was a big difference, she told me. It's not as if there were commercial reasons for the disparity. Of the top 10 literary fiction titles published last year, 9 had female authors, but maybe Nichols's experience is just anecdotal. Is there any scientific evidence for women being biased against women? The answer is yes. Several experiments have shown it. One by Yale researchers sent job applicants and CVs for a lab manager post to a male and a female science professors. The applications were identical, except that half were given a man's name and the other half a woman's. And guess what? The professors, both male and female, said that the man's application was better, that they were more likely to hire him and more likely to mentor him, and they offered him a substantially higher salary. So listen to why are even women biased against women. Mary Ann Sieghart asks where such discriminatory attitudes come from and what we can do about them. And here she goes into the weird lizard brain thing. So where does this bias come from? It comes from afar back in our evolution when we were learning to distinguish friend from foe. Our unconscious brain has hugely more processing power than our conscious brain, and it's always devising shortcuts known as heuristics. These heuristics, part of our reptilian brain, are born of experience. So this is the part I want to focus on because this is the important part. So if as a child we burn ourselves on a hot dish from the oven, we quickly learn to associate oven with hot and pain. Equally, if our society is filled disproportionately with men in top positions, We are going to associate male with leader, success, and competence, and female with home, children, and family. This overrides any natural bias women might have towards their own kind. So I'll just put that, what we could just call that conditioning. I'll say lifelong conditioning. And it's the same kind of thing where you can look at a situation and there's something wrong with it, but you can't tell what might be wrong with the situation. You might be looking at a scene and there's a bad feeling that you get inside of you where you know that. So there's a bad situation you might get inside of you and you don't know why, but you know there's something wrong with this situation. And it's not until you really inspect it very carefully that you realize, oh, there's like a electrical socket that's sparking and it's next to a thing that can light on fire. But it's after living a long life of learning what's dangerous and what's not, and what's bad and what's good. You have these patterns so ingrained into your subconscious that when you look at a scene, your conscious mind might not even recognize what's happening, but deep down, something just doesn't seem right. It looks off. So if visually all you see all your life is man in power, woman at home, when you see woman in power, something is just off inside of it. It's not anything you can help. It's just your life experience. That's what it teaches you. So there's a test for unconscious bias known as the implicit association test. To my dismay, it suggested that even I, a staunch feminist who's always had a career, may be slightly biased against working women. Male and female words and words representing work and family flash up on your screen. The test then measures how quickly you manage to associate each category and how many mistakes you make. So I think Susan said she took one of these for race, right? And I think there's this one for gender bias association. So Professor Mazarin Banaji of Harvard is one of the test creators. It told her that she may be biased too. It was the single most important and transformative day of my life, when I came to face with my own bias, with the fact that my mind and my hands weren't able to associate female with leadership as well as male with leadership. When I come face to face with the fact that I cannot associate dark-skinned people with good as equal as I can associate light-skinned people's faces with good things, that's very different from just awareness. That's like somebody putting a little dagger into me and turning it and asking me to sit up and take notice. So what she's saying here is someone can tell you're racist and you have racist inclinations, but until you take a test where it shows that more often you chose light-skinned people with good than dark-skinned people, you just proved that you really are. And now it's like a dagger being twisted inside of you, telling you to take notice. So the gender career test that we both took is a measure of how powerful our heuristics are, says Banaji. It says that a thumbprint of the culture, this was the thing that a thumbprint of the culture has been left on our brain. And I really that's a really good way to say it. And on this test, and again, I want to go back to the conversation we were having earlier about the Bible and Lana. Think of that with our biblical understanding, because it wasn't just that there are all these sexist stories in the Bible, and because of how our system was, it was constantly told to us that women bad, men good, and women listen to men kind of thing. But at home, we're told to have a daily study in the Bible every single day. So it was every single day that this gets reinforced in your head your entire life, that you are in religion or whatever, reading the Bible. The whole time you're getting this just pushed in there, and it might hurt, but because your belief system says this is what you have to believe to not die forever, then it's so bad. It's so bad. So for us to, you might sit here and think, well, I probably, now that I know, now that I have awareness, I'm good. But if you think about it deeper, I think we're still struggling a lot. And 1 year, I don't think is enough. I think there's still a lot in there that we don't realize that we need to get out of there. And I think that that's why this kind of study is going to help us a lot. But it's just so deeply embedded, and it's scary. It's scary how much damage it's caused and how hard it is to remove. So relying on God is really paramount, more than ever before, because we can't, a lot of times you can't see it until God shows you, different things. So anyways, so what can we do about it? Well, the first step is to be aware of it. However liberal and socially conscious you are, the changes are your conscious brain is fizzing with the stereotypes you outwardly disdain. Undergoing unconscious bias training is a start, but it's not enough. As Professor Bonaji asks, if I were to give you a lecture on fat and sugar and how our body converts that into energy, at the end of the 3-hour training program, will you have lost any weight? The important thing is to keep being aware of any possible bias. So this is what the main takeaway here is. When you're interviewing job applicants, try to correct for any unconscious bias that may be telling you the timbre of a woman's voice lacks authority. And this is a lot also what Elder Parmenter has been telling us when they've been choosing the continental leaders and everything. You have to, it's so hard to make a proper choice. You almost have to go against what you normally would because of how ingrained this kind of sexism is in our heads. So make sure you aren't more forgiving of a man's shortcomings than of a woman's. Compare them both rigorously with a job specification, and don't rely on your instinct or hunch. It requires a bit of work, but surely it's worth it. Sexism is as vile as racism and shouldn't have a place in modern society. And she goes back into the reptilian brain thing. But what do you guys think of that?
It's a really good
Yeah.
article. Go ahead.
Yeah, the conditioning, it's hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
And this is what we grow up with, and it's lifelong. Until you give your heart to God and God starts to slowly change your heart. This we talk about habits, and habits are hard to break because it's a thoughtless process that you don't even have to think about it, and you're constantly doing it, and you're not aware that you're doing it until your family member or your friend picks it up and says, "Hey, did you know that you're doing such and such and such?" And you say, "Really? No, I don't do that. No," and you deny it, and then you realize you're doing it. And even when you realize that you're doing it, it's become such ingrained in your brain that you can't stop it. And it's like the habit, it's become an addiction. And it is hard.
It is. And it kind of goes back to nature of man. So now we've been getting made aware of it, right? And it's not just, that's why I keep saying it's not enough to just passively sit there and wait to be explained to what's happening. Every single person, like Elder Tess and Elder Parmenter have been saying, have to do an investigation, find resources, question yourself, question your own motives, expose yourself to different scenarios and see what your feelings are when you see those things. Do you have some kind of bias in there? It takes a lot of work. But the problem is that sexism is the underlying test, like Elder Tess said last night, for our time. So we have to make every possible step we can in our power to search ourselves out in these things. And this also, with God's help, and then the kind of nature of man comes in, right? Because you have to make a choice of how you're going to act and how you're going to treat people, and it's hard, and it comes back to habits, like you said, because your brain paths are wired to go one direction, and now you're trying to stop that and make them go a different direction. So that's why that last sentence she said is that, the important thing is you have to try to correct for any unconscious bias that may be telling you the timbre of a woman's voice lacks authority. So when you're making a decision between two people and the gender is in the situation, one of the individuals is male and the other one is female, you have to take the extra step to say, okay, now that I'm having to undo a bunch of conditioning that I've have to dealt with all my life, first let me make sure that whatever I'm about to do doesn't have any sexism in there. So let me just question my motives and see why I might have a bad feeling about this person as opposed to this person. And let me see whether it's merited or not, and what it is that I don't like. So you have to make, before any judgment or any decision is made on people, you have to take that extra step consciously and investigate. And it's hard at first, but the more you do it, it gets easier, and then it becomes a natural part of what you do. And that's where we want to get to, so that we're making good, empathetic, kind judgments and decisions towards our fellow human beings.
Becoming aware of it.
Yeah.
And becoming aware of it is a necessity, because not just that it's out there in the messages that are being presented, but like we were talking earlier, becoming aware within your own self what exists and what doesn't exist. We have to become aware of it we have to face it before we can fix it. Before the physician can fix it, we have to face it first.
Yep.
It's interesting because I know I read this one too, but I don't think I sent it out because I held back on it because of the lizard talk. It took me back to the conspiracy theories and I pulled away from it.
Yeah, that's why I figured I'm just gonna because I think they were just going back to like evolution.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm just gonna highlight it. It's in there. It's in every article that we're gonna look at externally, because they don't have the complete truth. There's no way around it. And that's what Elder Tess said about the media broadcast one. So I'm just like, look, we're adults. We have to be able to act, and so.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, this is no different, really. I mean, it's half right, half wrong, right? I mean, that's what this is.
Yeah.
And we just have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So I mean, this deep sense of groove that's in our brain that becomes habitual. I mean, it's really this feminism and sexism and all that is no different, really, than any religion. So let's say you're a Catholic. I mean, how long have you been told ever since you're a child? You leave the Catholic faith, and you're gonna burn in hell forever.
Mhm.
And that's your mentality. Or even in Adventism, stay on the boat. You don't stay on the ark, you're gonna be lost. And that's our mentality. And so we're conditioned with all the half wrong information. And it's difficult to get it out of our minds, and grateful for this all right, not half right, half wrong, but all right information that we're coming into. Praise the Lord.
It's kind of interesting when you say that about Adventism, because in comparing to the Catholic Church that stay in the boat. You see that in Adventism. Hey, this is the only way. You got to be in Adventism or you're going to be lost. And yet now we understanding the parable of Acts 27 and still saying the same thing, but for, I guess the way I view it is a different reason, is no matter how hard the message gets, no matter where it takes you, no matter what you have to unlearn, no matter what you have to face within yourself, Jacob's time of trouble, whatever it is, stay on the boat, trust in God, and keep going forward.
Right. Yeah. I think you said it better. But in Adventism, when they say stay on the ark, that means structure. Don't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, just want to make that clear.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to look at how it affects men. And Phil was actually touching on this a little bit earlier as well, with what the expectations are for how a man is supposed to act. So one of them was going into life expectancy, which was super interesting to see that it actually has a huge effect on male life expectancy, and especially with when it comes to suicide rates, that's also a big issue. So why the patriarchy is killing men. Gender equality isn't just good for women, it also saves men's lives. Where's the little, let me do this. I can make it bigger. So, a woman holds a sign reading "Feminism equals equality" as she takes part in a nationwide women's strike for wage parity outside the federal place on June 14 in the Swiss capital, Bern. Liz Plank, a journalist, is executive producer and host of several digital series at Vox Media, which we've watched Vox videos before. She is the author of the new book, For the Love of Men, A Vision for Mindful Masculinity. When I traveled to Iceland in 2018, the World Economic Forum had ranked it number 1 in gender equality for an entire decade. According to the common way of discussing that honor, the country must be a feminist utopia for women. What goes underreported is how great it is for men too. In fact, Iceland men enjoy the highest life expectancy in Europe. They live almost as long as women do. If the number of years spent on Earth is one of the strongest predictors of well-being, Iceland men are doing pretty well. Is there some unique magic in the Reykjavik air? I probably didn't say that right. That makes this possible? Not at all. Iceland offers a model that could be widely adopted elsewhere in the world. It helps show that changing men's ideas about what it means to be a man and lifting up women in the process doesn't make men worse off. It has far-reaching benefits to their lives. The health advantages of feminism for men are not evident only in Iceland. In other countries with stronger gender equality, men also tend to fare better. According to research by Norwegian sociologist and men's studies expert Øystein Gullvåg Holter, there is a direct correlation between the state of gender equality in a country and male well-being, as measured by factors such as welfare, mental health, fertility, and suicide. Men and women in more gender equal countries in Europe are less likely to get divorced, be depressed, or die as a result of violence. These findings undercut one of the favorite facts of men's rights activists, that men die younger than women do. They use this data point to argue that feminism is unwarranted because women already live fuller or at least longer lives. But a world without feminism would exacerbate this problem, not solve it. Feminism is the antidote to shorter male life expectancy. Saying feminism causes men to decline is like saying firefighters cause fire. America doesn't just have a gender pay gap, it has a gender wealth gap. Women typically live longer than men because of several biological advantages that make them more resilient and give them more stamina, despite the stereotype that women lack it. But that's only part of the equation. The other component of the life expectancy gap is what scientists literally call man-made diseases. These are cultural. Men are more likely to smoke, abuse alcohol, engage in high-risk behavior, and have accidents at work. A report from the World Health Organization points to 3 reasons men don't live as long. The way men work, they endure greater exposure to physical and chemical hazards. Their willingness to take risks, thanks to male norms of risk-taking and adventure, and their discomfort with doctors. They're less likely to visit a doctor when they are ill, and when they see a doctor, are less likely to report on the symptoms of diseases or illness. When I became a lifeguard, I was shocked to learn that 80% of drowning victims are male, even though their aquatic skills are equivalent to those of women, because they're less likely to wear life jackets, more likely to overestimate their swimming abilities, and more likely to take risks. If men's rights activists really want to improve men's lives, then they should join feminists in dismantling bygone ideals of masculinity. When researchers controlled for unhealthy behaviors such as smoking or drinking, for instance, they found that men who earned less than their wives for an extended period of time, still experience poor health outcomes, shorter life expectancy, and increased chances of cardiovascular problems like diabetes, heart disease, high cholesterol, hypertension, and stroke. Because of the observable increase in men's anxieties in the familial arrangements and the lack of measurable change for women, researchers believe that these men lose the only sense of connection to their identity as breadwinners. Violating the code of idealized masculinity can be such a point of stress for men that it strains their overall health. Men's reluctance to care for themselves is especially perturbing when it comes to mental health. Unsurprisingly, the more a man associates with traditional and inflexible ideas about masculinity, the less likely he is to seek counseling. For too many men in America who suffer from mental health issues, it's easier to get a gun than a therapist, especially in rural areas where 80% of counties don't have a single psychiatrist. No wonder suicide rates are rising in rural states with the highest gun ownership rates, and that the vast majority of those deaths are among men. Although women are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide, the suicide rate for men is 4 times higher because men tend to use more violent means when choosing to end their lives. The most effective and violent of which is, of course, a firearm. And the connection between gun ownership and traditional masculinity is hard to deny, especially when we see gun manufacturers like Bushmaster instructing men to get their man card reissued by a gun. And this is their ad here: consider your man card reissued. Really amazing ad there. When feminism is met with violence, the mass availability of guns in the United States doesn't simply affect men, it disproportionately impacts boys. Of all the youth gun deaths between 2012 and 2014, a staggering 82% were boys, many of whom had used guns to kill themselves. The more a man identifies with traditional notions of masculinity, the more vulnerable he is. In fact, research on 2,431 young adults 18 to 19 years old by Daniel Coleman of Fordham University found that men who identified with rigid beliefs that men must provide at any cost, be invulnerable or self-sufficient, were more likely to have suicidal thoughts and exhibit signs of depression. Coleman concludes that idealized high traditional masculinity is a risk factor, especially for men who aren't able to fulfill that ideal because of life circumstances such as illness, disability, or loss of a job. A more flexible understanding of masculinity would prevent men from becoming unemployed, but it could help them cope with it better. They'd have a wider set of roles they could fall back on, like being a caregiver or contributing to their family outside of the narrow scope of material or financial resources. Suicide peaks during financial crises. When Hong Kong experienced economic turmoil in the 1990s, the suicide rate of men aged 30 to 59 almost doubled. After 2007, as a recession took over Europe, male suicide rates also spiked. While rates of suicide for both women and men rise in types of economic downturn, the increase tends to be sharpest for men. But data shows if the majority of them are breadwinners and they lose that capability, then of course it's gonna be really worse for them because they feel like that's their whole identity. So, But data shows that gender equality may dampen rates of male suicide because women's empowerment may protect men from economic shocks. If women are educated and can work, it lessens the financial responsibility that rests on men's shoulders. Research by Holter shows that societies with lower levels of gender equality are the ones with the highest rates of male suicide, and that the gender gap in suicide is smaller in nations with higher gender equality. One study by sociologists Aaron Reeves and David Stuckler found that in countries with high levels of gender equality like Sweden and Austria, the relationship between rising unemployment rates and suicide in men disappeared altogether. Wow. In turn, it turns out that when women do well, men do too. Rationally, no man in America should be afraid of feminism, yet many are. Giving up a small slice of privilege in exchange for a longer and happier life seems like a pretty sweet deal to me. But guys, if you don't believe me, just ask Iceland men. They have time. Really quick. So this goes back to conditioning. And it's a really unfair kind of, if I'm trying to remove myself from my position in life and put myself in a man's shoes. If you're born and all of a sudden from the moment that you're born, you're told you have to protect, you have to be strong, you have to make money, no emotions, no feelings, none of that. And not only that, but then this is the conservative version that you'll get in what's it called, inside of like a conservative religion. But then on the outside, you have things like, I don't remember if it was the Marlboro Man. That's what it was. I was watching videos on that from back in the day. I don't know how to spell cigarettes. I'm just gonna put cigarettes.
Well, yeah, I think Marlboro, yeah, cigarettes. Yeah, cigarettes is not, I think your definition of Marlboro is better than just putting cigarettes, because there were certain brand that was manly, like Camel and Marlboro. And then there's the female version, a Slim, right?
Oh,
So, yeah, so there are
yeah.
there's certain brands.
Virginia Slims.
Yeah,
They
Virginia
were the
Slims. there you
men's
go.
cigarettes, and Marlboro Man, yeah, he was the macho man.
Yeah, so alcohol and cigarettes. What I wanted to say is, for these, if you guys remember, because you probably remember better than I do. I've only seen in like little documentaries where they go back and talk about it. But the commercials, the way they portrayed the Marlboro Man, it was that guy who did the movies of the Westerns. I forget his name, but it was like
Sam Elliott.
no, the main guy, the Clinton.
John Wayne.
John Wayne, that's the one. So you got John Wayne, solitary, keeps to himself, doesn't talk about his feelings, just a lone man on a horse in the wilderness with a cigarette. No feelings, no nothing, no friends, no one to talk to, just a lone ranger, as you were. So, that's in the media. Then you have alcohol. I've seen those commercials where it's just always a guy who's in a really cool suit, or who's really cool, surrounded by beautiful looking women. You know what I mean? So all of these things internally in your own religion and then externally in the media, you're surrounded with these images. Images are so strong, not just words, but images that it's a visual that imprints itself. And visuals are honestly the main form of communication. You can talk to people, but until they see a picture of something, it's hard to understand. I think that's why the Bible is so descriptive and the prophecies are so descriptive and symbolic, because it captures your attention and it makes you see a scene that you have to really think about. So visuals are so powerful. And when you see, those things, it imprints itself on your mind. And it honestly, if I were a man if I were to put myself in a man's shoes, it would seem painful and unfair. And then I would look at women and how they get to, have all this fun talking to each other and do all this, playful things. And I have to be, have no feelings, be strong and protect. And I don't know if all guys like this, but I know some of them, it hurts. And they're like, I wish I could do some of that stuff, but society says I'm not allowed to. And if I do, I'm not a man. And so you can imagine every kind of trauma that a man might experience. Their father might have beaten them growing up. They might have gotten molested. They might have gotten who knows what. People might have bullied them in school all the time. It might have been really horrible. They can never talk about that because society told them that they have to bottle it up and shove it down and never, bring it up. So all of this keeps, pushing in and pushing until you just get a really resentful, upset individual, and rightfully so, because it's not okay for them to be told this. But then that comes out in really violent ways.
Yeah, it puts a huge pressure
Yeah,
on them.
it's a pressure cooker in there,
Yeah.
and that can explode like crazy. So it's you want to look, and this is another thing that Elder Tess has been emphasizing, is that the last dispensation was simple. It was so easy. You just had good and evil. You can look at Hitler and Churchill and say good, evil is Hitler and Churchill is good. It's so easy. But in this dispensation, we look at people like Abraham Lincoln and we attack him because he did one good thing, but he did a lot of other bad things. And it's complex. It's not easy. So you want to look at abuse and violence out there in the world. And it is a lot of violence of men, violating and raping and causing all this damage to women. But you look deeper, and it's because the entire structure is messed up, and it's not just hurting one, it's hurting both. And both are lashing out in ways that are just, not the greatest. So it's a very big mess. And Elder Tess was right. Where do you go? There's nowhere where you can go. The only safety we have is in this movement and in this message.
Yeah.
Only hope we have. So
Adriana.
Yeah.
Yeah, this brings to mind because Elder Tess mentioned it yesterday afternoon about the murder of 8 people in Atlanta. And this young guy had a sex addiction, and he had been under treatment in a treatment center for it. But of course, he did not get well, and it got worse. And the night that he committed this crime, his parents had thrown him out of the house because all he was doing was sitting around watching porn on his phone. And so, I mean, if you want to say the system is there for whatever addiction you might have to just ingrain you in it. And he was so distraught that he went to these spas where they were selling sex, and he killed, it was 3 different spas. He killed 8 people, and they were 4 of them out of the 8 were Asian. Well, they're now, and Elder Tess brought this out, that this is where things are going, we see it. There was race, it's now being claimed it's a racist act. But then what, as you were talking and bringing out some of these things about men, and, although these crimes are horrendous, but what made this guy this way? And, nobody's looking beyond this. They're looking at the crime and the racism, because Asian women were their lives were taken. He got a gun and he shot them. And the thing is, there's no, he possibly could have been helped, who knows? There are many other cases out there that are probably just potentials waiting to happen. Other things like this. And he felt that he was going to be free, at least of the rage he had within him, if he took these people out, these women. He felt that they were the ones that were the cause of his sex problem.
Yeah.
And I just find that just,
Well, that goes back to the structure and how it was set up. So it's constantly thinking that women are the cause of your, what we were talking about earlier, your passions, and the fact that you have no control, and the fault being back on women, instead of, the fact that you're watching pornography all day, and you're doing something that's not healthy.
yeah,
But again, it's so ingrained everywhere. And as far as the US, like Elder Tess was saying last night, you come here thinking you're finding freedom, but it's so ingrained, you have nowhere to go. No one has anywhere to go. And so you
exactly,
come here thinking you find freedom, and instead you're losing it.
absolutely.
So
It's so sad.
it is.
I mean, yes, so people are just on the edge, fear, then throw in the pandemic and everything else, they're more angry. And
Yeah. It's not going to get any better. So you have disease and you have economic stringents that are putting more stress.
yeah,
And it's only going to get worse from here. So
mhm,
the only place that's going to have any hope for the future, any positive possible hope of living in a society where you actually get freedom one day, the only place where that's ever going to be a thing is heaven.
exactly,
It's just
yeah,
not going to happen on this earth.
absolutely.
And that's our message. All the equality and the hope of getting to live in a place where you finally see what that actually looks like.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, it was a very good article. It was in the Washington Post on, I think it was yesterday's article that they had written. Did the investigation as far as where they are now. They didn't mention a lot about his background and all of that. Maybe it will come out,
yeah.
but it's a sad case for many other human beings out there that are suffering with one addiction or another and just filled with anger.
Yeah, and we don't know what the media he was consuming is, but there's only so much you can do, and if that person is hooked to their source of media that's teaching them the wrong thing in our lines, we know that that's death.
Yes.
You can't even, yeah. So the last article I've got here is the dangerous effects of toxic masculinity. Let's see. Well, something got deleted here. Toxic masculinity is a concept used to define unhealthy and often traditional characteristics or attributes associated with men. From being unemotional and power hungry to narcissistic and violent, men are oftentimes defined by these outdated and unfounded stereotypes, which create an unhealthy and unrealistic understanding of what it means to be a man in today's society. Assuming men should be protectors, breadwinners, or leaders, or associating men with anger, selfishness, and aggression can be problematic and damaging. When those beliefs are based on unproven biases that we, as both individuals and a society, perpetuate, boys and men are taught to falsely believe them or to try to measure up to them, ultimately harming themselves and others in the process. Manhood and womanhood. In many ways, manhood, like womanhood, comes with many expectations in the United States. As a society, we value kindness, compassion, and care in women more than we do in men. We also positively associate men with being protective and negatively associate men with being emotional, according to the Pew Research Center. This does not mean that men aren't caring, compassionate, or emotional, but we as a society don't value these traits in men, and that can lead men to believe these traits aren't valuable. So men tend to keep so much bottled up inside. which going back to that, it's for how it's set up for women to see a man as a means to survival. Of of course, when you see, characteristics that you associate with vulnerability, such as being emotional, then you aren't going to find that valuable in someone who you're supposed to rely on to survive. So again, the entire system is set up to not have men have these traits that are essential to being a human being. So
Also all these things, I'm just thinking about a lot of different stuff in my past. These things, they have a different way of manifesting in different men.
Mm-hmm.
It'll manifest itself out. Like some will be violent. There'll be various things. Like for my ex-husband, he took to drinking. He was his mom and dad divorced, and she remarried. And the stepdad was if you get past the strictness of him, that he later realized was so negative, military background strictness, it had a really negative effect, and ridiculing and using that strictness. And so we were like kind of on the, or he was like, my ex-husband, kind of on the verge of a breakthrough, but alcohol was pulling at the same time. And he was literally almost ready to start recognizing some of the underlying issues, because what I talked about earlier with my own self, it's realizing these things that you don't know within your own self, these underlying things, these things that molded and shaped you, and you're on this chain link that you don't even know anything's wrong. You just are who you are. And so he was almost ready to actually recognize some of those things. And I won't go into those details as to why I knew that, but alcoholism was really pulling at him, and eventually won and took him, because I know that we listed alcohol as one of the things, or going into addictions is one of the things. So it can manifest itself in different ways.
Yeah, because I mean, if you have all these stressors, and on top of having all these stressors, you're not even allowed to deal with them in a healthy way, like, therapy, because that's also not considered okay, then of course a lot of people are going to turn to, substance abuse, alcohol, different things.
Yeah, it's funny or interesting as we go through this, because like I said, I went from being a really weak person to a very strong, independent. And that was one of the things that he really was attracted to me for, because he would kind of laugh at it. He thought it was, I don't know how to put it. You have to be back there to understand.
He's got spunk.
Yeah, he really liked it. He enjoyed it. He knew that I would take my stand. But underlying, I can look back, underlying, it really hurt him, because he didn't know how to handle it. It was funny on the surface and good on the outside, and he loved it. But inside, he really didn't know how to handle it. And the interesting thing is when we did go to counseling, the counselor knew my heart. He knew, hey, I'm not trying to be the strong one here, or not. I'm not trying to be the one in charge. I wanted equality. And it's really interesting how everything comes full circle, because I was not trying to be the one in charge of the family. I wanted us both to be equal because that's the way I saw marriage, was we're both equal. And he didn't know how to do that. He only knew the manly things he was taught, but yet he appreciated, and I mean, we still talk today. He still gets a kick out of the strength, but he didn't know how to handle it. You know what I'm saying? So it manifests it manifests itself through alcoholism.
Yeah, so the whole that comes to another issue, that men are taught that they're supposed to be needed and not wanted.
Yeah.
So if you can't provide, and a woman doesn't need you to provide or take care of or protect her, then what does she need you for? You're not needed. And if you're not needed, then she can leave you anytime she wants. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
that need part is a form of oppression, because you're kind of stuck. If you don't have this person, you don't have what you need, the things that you need to survive. But this situation here is a difficult place to find, a equal kind of love in, because part of the reason you're with an individual might not be because you love them completely. It's just that you have no other choice. But wanted is a choice. So you can both work, you can both, provide, do everything. But the fact that you chose each other, that you wanted each other because you care about each other, your personalities you're interested in, you have similar interests, you have similar ideas, you have good conversations, you know what I mean? You have someone to rely on emotionally and to be there for you. It's a equal want thing is it's hard to switch for I think in a man's brain, from being needed to being wanted. It's a hard switch. So if you were independent Elaine, it's cool and all, and you're awesome, but then he has to deal with the fact that, well, I'm technically, she doesn't need me.
Yeah, and the
So-
hard thing too is, it goes back to some of the other articles, is life has to bring them, whether it be through counseling, book, life experiences, what have you, they have, just like I had to, you have to come to be aware of it yourself. You have to come to know and learn of your own self, because you're just, I'm just going to explain it the way it seems to me. You're just manifesting behaviors without understanding what's driving those behaviors. So
Yeah.
you have to come to identify, and that's kind of where I, over the past 25, 30 years now, I live my life over, if I've got some kind of bad emotion or wrong this or wrong that, it's identify it. Figure out what it is, Elaine, so you can fix it. Identify it. Because until you identify it, you can't fix it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was trying to say. He was like on the verge of identifying it. And but his love affair with alcohol won.
Yeah, and just to go back to this real quick, I know this is what I've seen in my research, but I don't think it's black and white like this. I think relationships are a lot of times a mix of both need and want.
Mhm.
But I was just to make a point that when that need factor goes out for a lot of men with the traditional upbringing, it's a test for them. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I think Donna was gonna. No, Fel?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask, I remember last week Linda was talking about something that she had experienced at work, and I was wondering if she would want to share that with us today.
Oh yeah,
Oh, you mean my coworker?
yeah.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Yeah, that was a story, all right. She, this is about, it's January 16th, 2016. Well, prior to that, she talked me, because I was unemployed at the time, I guess. She talked me into trying to apply for a job at this place she was working at, in Illinois. And it was close to where she lived, 5-10 minute drive, but it was a little hike for me, depending on traffic, which often wasn't good in the morning. I hate driving. I hate traffic. And I went on and on with her and argued with her endlessly. No, I don't want this. And it was office work, which I had failed at many times before. And so eventually she won out because, she's one of these, she just won't settle for a no. And so, I went through the motions of applying, and she helped me through the process, gave me pointers and all this jazz. And initially I'm thinking, the idea is coming across. She wants me to get some decent job skills compared to what I had been, doing. And so I'm like, yeah, okay. And so I applied. It's an older guy, probably in his mid 60s. And there was a couple other men in their 60s, and then another guy closer to our age, late 50s, mid to late 50s. And she and I were the only two women there. She had been going through about a year's worth of training to get the job, learning the different software and everything there. And the woman who was training her, had been there for 20 years. She was, oh man. And I had been listening to my friend bellyache about the situation over the phone to me. When she would call me complaining about the people she worked with, complaining about the woman who trained her, who was like vicious. And that was one of the arguments. I said, I don't want to work with that, but anyway, I gave into it, and I said, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll just quit. And I'm not one of these people that's an easy quitter. You wouldn't know that from looking at my resume and stuff, but it's just that, many jobs I've had in the past, the company shut down, moved away and whatnot, or went out of business. It wasn't necessarily my fault that I had to change jobs. But anyway, I got in there. She proceeded to start training me to do the job. And she and I were going to be like, sharing the job sharing, so she could maybe cut her hours back or change her hours or take days off when she felt like it. I didn't really do that. And so she started teaching me to do all the grunt work, detail-oriented work, a lot of the data entry and that kind of thing. And she kind of fashioned herself as the customer service person. And if I had questions, I'd have to go to her or the boss guy. And it turned out that all the men in the office were big time Trump supporters, Republicans, conservative. And it came across with a couple of them, I think anyway, she thought that there was sexism going on. Just the difference in the way we were treated from the way the men were treated. But the weirdest thing about the whole thing was, and she and I had been friends since college. In recent years before this, we had started having more arguments. She had become more combative. She had gotten in arguments with me over the phone, and she was always a little on the combative side. It didn't matter how old we were, but it got worse and worse. And she thought, oh, we're going to get along great. We're going to have fun in this job because, we're old college buddies. Well, all that kind of went out the door for me because it just seemed like she started attacking me, bullying me, picking on me, making fun of me even. And the stress of the traveling, the traffic, the commuting, the sitting all day in the office, which I just couldn't stand. The worst of it all, though, was the mistreatment, not just by her, but by the boss. But it was mostly her. She was sitting right in front of me, no cubicle. I had no place. Neither one of us had any privacy. It was all open office, very small, cramped open office with 5 or 6 people. But the worst of the treatment was from her. And I thought, what is going on here? I know this is kind of her style, but this is so unprofessional. And she would act this way to one of the guys in the office too. But it seemed like it's either that or I didn't know what to do because I didn't feel like, getting so unprofessional. And it got to a point where I would just walk out of the office. I would just walk out the door, go for a walk and come back, or go and lock myself in the bathroom and cry, literally cry. I was so upset by how I was treated. And the whole thing played out as, oh, you know what, you're just going to have to suck it up, the blah, 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 blah. And I can't go into all the details of why the argument started. I don't even know if I can remember, but it was just vicious. And just remembering it now, it's taking me back to all the stress I was going through. I was so sick. I was so physically sick. I had spent like a year and a half going to a naturopathic school, figuring out, and this may have been just because of all the extra stress I was going through, premenopause on top of that. which was more major than, ended up being more major than I thought it could be. But the stress was depleting me. I was just, my vitamin D was wiped out. My B12 was wiped out according to tests. I was just so, I mean, compared to where I'm at right now, I just, people wouldn't recognize me. And I literally was physically sick, and including after I got this job, my immune system was still kind of wiped out. And it took so long to come back from it. And yeah, I just, and now I can say the last phone call I had with her, because of where the movement's taking us, she recognizes 2, 3, whatever, 4 years ago that I was more on the conservative side than her. And I would say right now, and according to our last phone call we had, maybe early January, that we had together, I was in agreement with her. I mean, and she had said to me in previous phone calls, Belinda, you've changed. and she should have been really happy about some of the things that had changed about me. But still, because she was so used to being combative with her conservative Republican friends, she was still hurling that anger at me. And I said, we are in agreement about things. Why are you yelling at me? Why are you yelling? And I just gotten to a point, and I was, my sister Elaine knows this, I was just beginning to go into menopause, and I was totally falling apart because of it. I'm still going through waves of it, where I'm just exhausted. I can't, including today, end of the week. And I was so much worse at that point. It was just all like falling on my head at that point. I didn't know what to do about it. And I just couldn't deal with what she was, throwing on top of me. So some of that destroyed relationship was still manifesting itself between her and I in early January. Finally, at some point in the phone call, she says, Linda, I'm not going to call you anymore. If you want to talk to me, you'll have to call me. I never did, because it's just got old finally. And yes, I did quit that job. I quit that job May of 2019. Yeah, I quit. I walked out. It had come to a point between boss and I that it wasn't working anymore. And eventually she quit too, for much the same reason, not long after that. And I can't even use a job on my resume. I can't even use it as a reference, because it was just a mess. And yeah, it's one of the only relationships I still had going on since college. I don't think we're never going to talk to each other again, but we're still on Facebook. She and I see each other's posts. I don't think we're never going to talk again, but I don't think I can, especially because of the wonderful experience I've had with this group, where people don't yell at each other. Nobody belittles anybody. Nobody cusses and swears and calls people names. It's to go from this to talking to her is such a shock. My body at this stage of my life just can't handle it anymore, physically and mentally and emotionally. And it's a shame. 20 years back, things were so much better. But yeah, I wanted to get to the point where I wanted to explain something I read after I quit the job, after this all started going on. I read something about how professionally, women who work in circumstances where there is sexism going on, or there is some sort of emotional abuse between the male like authorities, males in authority and the women underneath them, literally causes women who were working together in that circumstance to lash out at each other.
Yep.
It can, and I'm like, whoa, is that what was going on? Is she being this way to me because, and she considered herself the one who was like the office manager or the person who was kind of running things. And was she thinking of, and I know this for a fact, that she kind of thought of me as if I was trying to take over her.
Competition.
Yeah, even though I really wasn't. Yeah, I'm better at certain things than her. I'm good at editing. So she'd call me to edit her emails because she's not good at spelling and writing. It's kind of her second language. And she's Ukrainian. So it's kind of her second language. and stuff. And she'd get mad at me. You know, sometimes I'm looking over her shoulder and I'm like, Teresa, you misspelled something in the email. Well, get away from me, you know? And but then there's times when she's doing something really important, an important email. She says, Linda, come to, you know, listen to my email. And I can't remember everything in the article, but that was the gist of what I got. And I suppose if I Googled it, I'd be able to find the information again. But it kind of, it didn't tell me what to do about it, really. I never could figure out, and to this day, I can't figure out what to do with her. I can't figure out how to fix the situation because she does not want to be fixed. She literally believes, has believed for years, that her way is the only way. And when one of our friends is being conservative and racist or sexist, or just the fact that they supported Trump, that was the basis of so much abuse, that she has every right under the sun to be abusive, to yell, even if it's her kids or her friends from college. She can be as abusive and yell. She can yell and be as abusive as she wants, to the point she admitted, Jerry hung up on me again. And then her other friend, same thing, you know, and I'm like, you haven't managed to convince any of them about anything.
Dear Linda, I just wanted to say, I mean, not to generalize every, people, but I have to say that it's very common for the people from that world, so former Soviet Union countries, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Russia. It is very common that women mistreat other women. In fact, this is so prevalent, that this is so normal. It is like you go to a store and you just get ready, you're going to be yelled at for nothing by the cashier. It's normal.
Her whole family was like that.
Yes.
I remember thinking, yeah.
It is mindset. This is the problem with this whole Soviet Union, is this mindset. Even so that we say that from 1917 that we have accepted the women's equality, because of it's part of the Marxist ideology, right? But but in fact, in reality, we didn't. There is such a mistreatment of women by women, and just common rudeness that is so prevalent. And I have that. I probably have had a little bit of that. I mean, I catch that, in myself. But I'm just saying that it is part of a culture where you can get yelled for nothing, out of nowhere, for no reason, just because that person just feels like yelling. He doesn't like something that you're wearing, something that you're doing, or the way you look, and it could be any number of reasons. And this is just this is a part of our problem. I mean, the former Soviet Union countries' problem. It's a big problem, and unfortunately, and this is it's very amazing that when people when I came to United States, it was such a shock to me that people are so nice. You know, like you walk into some kind of, you know, big store and people say hi to you, you know. I remember I was like, hi, you're supposed to say hi. And then I said hi to everybody I was passing by. You know, it's a difference in cultures. And that culture, you know, Ukraine, I mean, we don't, the Soviet Union doesn't want to, I mean, former Soviet Union, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, they don't want to accept the, you know, admit that, but in fact, we haven't dealt with sexism or nationalism. We just said that we don't have it in Soviet Union, period. But we had it, and we just mistreated each other all the time. And now this kind of people, they come to United States, and I see them, and I can hear because I understand, I speak Russian, right? But by my looks, because I look Asian, people don't, Russians don't recognize me right away, and and I hear such terrible, things. I mean, people just talking about the Americans, trashing Americans, the equality of, about the, such deep racism just being shown within these private conversations that they think that nobody understands. What I'm trying to say is that it is just a part of a culture, and it is so deep seated that if now I just right now try to Google sexism articles in Russian, and there's only some in BBC Russia, bbc.ru, but none from most of the Russian articles are about, let's not talk about, let's not fight for women fighting for women's rights, men fighting for men's rights. Let's talk about, let's fight for everybody's rights. So what I'm trying to say is that I can relate to this, and I can tell you that my friend, I had a very close friend, and she was, in Russia when I was in medical school, and I remember she's Russian, ethnically Russian, and she looks Russian, blonde hair, blue eyes, and she, because of her looks, well, even so she was Russian, she wasn't the prettiest girl, okay, and she made people mistreated her because she just wasn't pretty. The same women mistreated her, and the same women mistreated other people. I mean, it's unbelievable. There's such an inequality going on, and it's from every side, by every side, and it's just such an infection. I understand you, but I also wanted to say that I don't know what can help that person, but just don't waste your energy. It's
the sad thing is 20 years back when we both had little kids, we had a great time because I was homeschooling and not working at the time. She had just quit her 10-year career, and we both majored in computer science. She actually had a career and I didn't, but had a great career and quit her career, and we just had a ball taking the kids here and there and everywhere, and and I know she might have hollered at her kids a little bit, but they were pretty young at the time. And I know she kind of got into fights with her husband, and who's not Ukrainian. He's actually was raised, in a Jewish family. And he's much quiet, he more on the quiet side. And I know, even back then she could manifest this, but it seemed as if there was a lot less venom aimed at me. And I don't like hearing the yelling about anything, but I mean, I could always find a little bit of amusement in the fact that she was attacking the men in the office for being Trump supporters at the time, and things that they would say and everything. But the darts being aimed at me at times when all I was doing was asking a question. Oh yeah, she was up a lot the night before drinking and hanging out and come to work the next morning in a really bad mood. Yeah, that was what led up to some of it. She was trying to still keep living as if we were still 21 years old. which wasn't working out very well. She was going through menopause at the time, and I wasn't. And she was going through this hot flash business and just whatever, and a lot of stress otherwise because of things going on with her family. But still, there's no time to go into all the details of what was going on, but a lot of it was just ridiculous. And I was able to connect with our other college friends through her. We had been hanging out, family get-togethers with our friends at her house for 20 whatever years. And I'm sure it'll happen again. She's even hinted about it with my husband. We're all friends on Facebook. And yeah, I don't mind getting together with all of them, but talking to her on the phone and everything, with everything that's going on, I just don't have the energy anymore. I don't have the energy for anything. It's a struggle every day now. And there's so many things I want to do, so many things I wish I could be doing. When I heard Sister Allie was going back to school and everything, and I'm like, yeah, I was even contemplating that not too long ago. Do I have the energy? No, my job is a total drag. Go nowhere because of COVID. It's gotten worse. And what I used to enjoy about it doesn't even exist anymore. It's gotten to be just like, whatever. And yeah, I'd be one of those people who would love to go back to school and, learn something new and keep my brain going. Not that I'm not doing what all the rest of you are trying to do and study and learn and all this and read. But yeah, at my age, with what's going on with me, I pretty much know it's not going to happen. And, I'm hoping for something better somewhere down the road. I got my husband some COVID-19 vaccine appointments this morning, finally. And, we'll both be vaccinated by April. And, but yeah, I'm sure there's some Ukrainians out there that aren't like her, because I think I've seen some, but she's just in a very extreme version. And the potty mouth stuff, her cussing and swearing, I don't know. What do you do with a person like that? What?
That is
What?
you just
What do you do with that?
That is the problem. This is the essential problem: drinking, swearing, and being rude. You just described.
Yeah,
So
her and her mother are identical twins. When they get fighting at each other, and this goes back to college, and yeah, and I've just grown less, it's grown more distasteful for me with time. And I know her menopause and everything has led to more drinking. It's a badge of honor. What?
I'm sorry. Do you think that she's drawn to you because somehow now I think she sees that you're in agreement with her on the coin?
Well, yeah, that's the great thing. She was always on the right side of the issues. Always. Back when we were conservative, back when I had these backward ideas about things, including, Obamacare and vaccinations and all that jazz, I got into arguments with people in the office about this stuff. Right now I'm in arguments with SDAs about this stuff. But yeah,
you might be the only light in her life though. So don't if you can, with the Facebook and everything, still keep in touch with her, because worldly people aren't gonna be godly people. If they're not, if the Bible isn't there, they're not going to be like, oh, well, I can't, drink and everything. So just hang on if you can. And, you might be the only light in her life that she has. And I don't think if Lana also doesn't appreciate some of that behavior. So there's people in those countries that act like that. And there's people who don't like that. There's people who act like that, so it is rough. And I know that I've had coworkers where it's jarring to say the least. Some of the way, some individuals act, it's loud and very aggressive, but meekness means easily intruded upon. So
if it's to the point where you are so physically sick you can't even function anymore, that's just above and beyond. But you know what the thing is? Her kids have turned out great. Yes, she yelled at them constantly. I mean, berated and beat and everything and cussed and swear. Her daughter just got accepted UIC California for psychiatry residency. Her other 3 kids doing great. One's in Germany, graduated from college. The other 2 are in college. I mean, compared to my kids, but they had a father, okay? They always had a father figure who was, good father figure, and he was successful and they grew up in a stable family. I mean, but I do know that even he was tired of being berated by her.
It's difficult. It's definitely not easy. But I'm sure any little, if she ever tries to talk to you, I honestly don't know 100% how to deal with this either, because it is tough. And
if I ever did find out.
An insane amount of empathy, and trying to think, because a lot of times you have to look at a person's character and slash away the stuff that's just habit that's and just cut that away, and then look at the main center of the person and what they want and what they believe in, because if they use a lot of cussing and all that kind of language, that's kind of like, I don't know how to say this, but like decoration on top of the main subject. It's very intense decoration, but the main subject is that they have a beliefs that they believe is right, and they have interest, and every person wants to be loved, and that's one motivator for everyone. There's a lot in there that we can come together on. It's just harder with some people to look past all the on top of the surface stuff, but I think we got to keep practicing.
Her liberal friends, her Democratic liberal friends, who are like, one of them had been her best friend since high school or college, more so than me. They all seem to be fine, or at least tolerant of the crazy behavior. But for me personally, all the constant personal attacks and the way she did it, I just can't handle it. I can't handle the abuse. I've got to have.
The test often is more about us learning to respond and learning to recognize, or looking beyond somebody already said it, but looking beyond the behavior to the underlying issues that cause the behavior, helping us to have empathy for them, and then that empathy can actually draw them to you. And then the fact that children have grown up and have really good educations and jobs is not always a sign that everything is all great. When I mentioned earlier that psychologist of the book that I read, she was counseling married couples for 20 years, and suddenly one particular couple that she was counseling, their story, for whatever the reason, she was ready for it or what have you, totally resonated with her. And after 20 years of counseling married couples, she goes home and she realizes that she's in a misogynist relationship, that in her work field, in her career, she was well respected. And when she went home, she was ridiculed, mocked, and belittled, and didn't even recognize it. And for whatever the reason, that couple that she counseled, suddenly she was recognizing what she'd been living, all her life. So it doesn't always mean the damage is done, but I do believe that often these things come to us to actually help us. I don't know the right words to put into it, to help us to learn to see that, hey, I don't handle this one well. Or help me learn, teach me, help me learn how to handle this, because we're here to be used by the Lord to help these people. And he can actually help us.
She sees it as she has to fix everybody. She's got the answer for everybody, and nobody else is right. And so when I would try to discuss things or bring up things or share things, well, give it to me in one sentence. I don't have time for that. I don't have to blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, then the conversation is going to be a little one-sided because I can't sum this up in one sentence. I mean, I just the way I am. I have to kind of like, present things. That's the way I am in a conversation.
There's nothing wrong with saying that. So, sometimes it's okay, especially if someone's abusing you, if you need to stand up for yourself and say, hey, I can't operate the way you're acting is just not, I can't, I want to talk to you. I want to have good conversations for you. I think we have really good points that we both agree on, but this cross thing is not appropriate.
Well, she would just cuss and swear back at me and call me names or whatever. It's just a vicious circle. And so I figured, it just needs to stop. I don't know what to do anymore. And so, yeah, and maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just too menopausal now. And I always would say to people, I can't deal with menopausal women. I don't know what to do about it. I've never been able to handle women in menopause because they're just like, and she was one of them. And now I'm in that situation. And I found some things that help, but I'm still not out of the, the mud yet. And so it's just avoiding stress. That's what they tell menopausal women. Avoid stress, don't do too much, get plenty of rest. And that's hard in our society to say, oh, I can't go out jogging anymore. I can't do all that stuff anymore. I can't. But there's so much you want to do. You just don't have the energy anymore. So I don't.
Hopefully you get some rest so you start to feel better. But if maybe something happens and she changes in the future, just keep a little channel open if there's ever a chance. All right.
Yeah.
So we're at 4:40 and we have quite a bit of this article to go, but I think we can read through it pretty quick. So if everyone's okay, I'll just do that. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So men tend to keep bottled up inside, so much bottled up inside. This includes all the traumas and heartbreaking moments. Eventually there has to be a release, and too often that is an explosive one. Fragile masculinity, a term referring to the unrealistic cultural standards placed on men, exists because many men feel they have to overcompensate or act in a certain way to meet these traditional standards. But we are all human. As human beings, regardless of gender, we have a combination of masculine and feminine traits. Gender schema theory and roles in culture. While feminism has pushed America to redefine and reconsider the role of girls and women, it has also raised questions about boys and men and what their role is in society. Rather than defining boys or men as good or bad or tough or weak, it's important to recognize that men, like women, have many facets that extend far beyond the traditional roles of their gender. Traditional societal views of masculinity have a negative impact on every member of society, but studies show they have a greater impact on the self-image, relationships, and overall mental health of gay men. And next week, I want to get into that because even within the LGBTQ community, sexism and gender stereotypes have had an impact on them too, outside of what's, directly obvious. So next week's going to be really interesting. What our society needs to remember is that being a man doesn't mean you have to like sports or women. Being a strong man doesn't mean you can't show weakness or cry. Being successful man doesn't mean you have to marry or become a C-suite executive. Sexual preferences and gender identities, just like career choices and lifestyle choices, don't make you any less of a man. The truth is, being a man can mean whatever you want it to mean, says Bret East, author of A Gay Man's Guide to Life. You get to decide. Effects of toxic masculinity. When men actively avoid vulnerability, act on homophobic beliefs, ignore personal traumas, or exhibit prejudiced behaviors against women, this contributes to many large societal problems such as gender-based violence, sexual assault, and gun violence. Violence and aggression. Masculinity becomes fragile through its rigidity. When it cannot afford to hold the panoply of gender expressions, sexual cultural orientation, or feminine strength intrinsic to any pluralistic society, then it must lash out or risk crumbling under the weight of its own culturally constituted expectations, says East. Whatever the cause, the response is almost always a form of violence. Sometimes this violence is outwardly expressed through physical dominance or aggression. Other times it is inwardly expressed through depression, addiction, or suicide. Men are perceived as more violent than women, and as evidenced by the crime rates, most criminal crimes are committed by men, but also most criminal crimes, with the exception of sexual assault, are committed against men. So violence of men on men. Though men are often the perpetrators of sexual assault, we often forget that millions of men in this country have also been victims of sexual assault. Male violence is a problem, but so is male victimization. Statistically, 5 to 10% of girls are subjected to penetrative sexual abuse, but 5% of boys are also subjected to penetrative sexual abuse, and this is rarely discussed. When men and women are accused of similar crimes, men are more likely to receive longer sentences than women, with women being twice as likely to avoid incarceration upon conviction. Every behavior is connected to a need, says Mac Exelis, MA, EDM, MHC, LP, a mental health clinician at Citron Hennessy Therapy. One thing I've seen with men with anger issues and violent paths is that these are behaviors that are learned. Behaviors that are learned. And Phil pointed that out the last time we met, with that, all these things you learn. A lot of times that violence or that anger is a way to protect vulnerability. Unfortunately, many men aren't taught how to be vulnerable, how to overcome trauma, or how to embrace every aspect of themselves. Take Aaron Hernandez, for instance, who battled numerous traumas in childhood and ultimately grew up to become a professional football player and larger-than-life man. He ended up in prison, convicted of murder, and ultimately committed suicide. He had been asked for help for so long on so many occasions, says Blake. I feel like part of my role in life is to help the world know Aaron was a good guy. We all failed him in life. Society often puts pressure on men to be men in the traditional sense, rather than simply be human. For men, vulnerability is often neglected, dismissed, or combated. When men push down emotions, ignore feelings, or dismiss their feminine traits, their mental health will suffer. Mental health concerns. As of 2018, significantly more men than women died from an opioid overdose. Men are far more likely to die by suicide than women. Men, like women, experience anxiety, depression, and mental illness. However, men are more likely than women to underutilize mental health services, and they are more reluctant to seek help, especially when it comes to mental health. As a country, we often fail to address the many traumas faced by boys and men, and we often punish behaviors without addressing the underlying issues that lead to those behaviors. We need to eliminate the stigma around mental illness and remind men that asking for help, expressing emotions, and seeking therapy isn't just beneficial, it's necessary for the betterment of our society. Most men are simply in survival mode, says Dan Doughty, co-founder of Everyman. Raising boys in today's world. When Michael Kimmel, the founder and director of the Center for the Study of Men and Masculinities at Stony Brook University, asked his students what it means to be a real man, he received answers like authoritative and suppressing any kind of weakness. BIPOC boys and men. Traditionally, boys are taught to act like men, and in many cases treated like men, which can greatly impact their understanding of themselves and their place in the world. For Black boys in particular, the expectations and misconceptions can be dangerous. Studies have shown that Black children are seen as less childlike than white children and are often perceived as being older than they are. Exelis points out that minority men in particular have to do a lot more work every day. They need space, time to rest, and the opportunity to share or express their anger. Whether you join group therapy or individual therapy or visit an organization like Black Men Heal, the goal is to better understand yourself and your emotions and prioritize your mental well-being. Boys should learn that emotions are healthy. When we treat boys as men and teach them to be emotionless, tough, and secure, we strip them of their innocence and we place unrealistic and unhealthy expectations on them. We need to teach young men from an early age that it's good to express emotions, says Exelis. In both our education system and at home, we need to help boys and men label their feelings and understand them. By approaching this in a non-judgmental, curious way, we can eliminate the fears surrounding therapy and mental health. Boys and young men are by nature in great need of guidance, says Dottie. We need men to be role models for the new generation. It all starts with teaching boys to not be men, but to be humans, says Blake. This should not be a gender issue. Once we make this a human issue, toxic masculinity will fade. Boys must be taught how to deal with negative feelings. Anger is judged upon. Bottling it up doesn't do anything, says Exelis. We need to offer men ways to deal with that anger. Exelis recommends focusing on 5 sensations and counting down if you're feeling angry or frustrated. Focus on 5 things you can hear, 4 things you can see, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can touch, and 1 thing you can taste. This gets you out of your head into your body and tune into your environment. Sit with the breath and be wherever you are without having to drain yourself of energy, Exelis says. You can also take a nap, go for a run, drink some tea, or splash cold water on your face. A word from Very Well. Toxic masculinity is something that still needs to be addressed, and the only way to help men learn that emotions don't devalue them or make them weak is by instilling that mindset within them from a young age. The dangers of toxic masculinity are clear, and as a society, it's important to remember that everyone is human, and finding healthy ways to process emotions is important for all of us, especially men. Also, when you're struggling with the mental health effects of toxic masculinity, or you need someone to express your emotions to, there is no shame in reaching out for help from a mental health professional. The end.
That's a good article too. All of them were.
Yeah.
We're all damaged.
Yeah,
Somebody mentioned that earlier, that they're damaged. Yeah, we've all been damaged. And the issue of gender and sexism is really, we saw it on the chiasm, what Elder Tess laid out, that it is the final restoration of this healing and all this damage it's caused, all the damage we cause one another as a result, the damage and the violence that takes place in the various parts of the world, and the final step in restoration.
Yeah.
In this issue.
Yeah. Thank you for the study, and these are all great articles, except there's one flaw, is that, and these are all, humanistic ways of so-called treatments, and, on surface that might work, but the basic problem is our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And until our hearts, which is happening to me, to us, until our hearts are changed, these are, they're only good on a surface. And so we need Christ to be the to be the king of our hearts, because nothing really is going to change. We're still going to have, we're into this earth 6,000 years. And what has changed in 6,000 years? Nothing really. still goes on. We're still misogynistic. We're still abusing women. We're still abusing different races, different genders that are different than the prototypical, whoever made the rule. So
What tool does God use to change the heart, though? Because biblically, the one that I can remember is when God's people decided to be ruthless and be destructive and hurt the poor and the weak and not give them help and led them to slavery. Basically, what God did to change the hearts of his people was let them go into slavery. So the only way I feel like he's been able to change the hearts is to show his people the pain of it. So that's why I think Elder Tess keeps pointing out those Yazidi women and their pain and their struggle, and the women who were killed in Atlanta. This is, I think, looking at the pain and researching it out is what helps kind of change the heart. Because unless you're facing what people have to deal with and looking at how much damage it causes, and it when you feel that pain, that's, I think, what helps change the heart.
But you also have two things going on here. You have the internal, the priests being prepared to be the 144,000. But then you have the external that don't know Christ to have their heart changed. So it's in our hands, or we've been called to go through that change of heart experience and become aware of these things, as Adriana said, become aware of these things and gain empathy by studying these things out, that we be prepared to fully reflect his image when we go do this work, because the external events are leading them to these, there are many in the external that are more aware of things like this than we have been. So they're being prepared for that day of freedom to come.
yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit the point on the head. That's what I was trying to express. It's incumbent, really, we have a huge responsibility, because we have to reflect the character of Christ, because God is working on their hearts. But if we don't come to them with that message and showing them there is a better place, because on this earth, nothing's going to change, but there is a better place, that if we do our job correctly, by the grace of God, their hearts are going to change, because their hearts are going to be worked on, and then we'll be on the journey together. But we have an awesome responsibility to show that the love, the mercy, the grace of Christ.
Amen. And one thing that I always thought of a long time ago, before I was ever in this message, is that it's going to happen. The question is it going to be, are we going to be a part of it? And it's a great responsibility, but it's also a great privilege and a blessing to be a part of it. And we can be assured this is the line of success. So we can rejoice knowing that we're going to see the results of restoration in our lifetime, and people
Amen.
free from all this and choosing life.
Amen.
Amen.
So look at people not as male or female or race or LGBT, humanity. We're all humanity.
Yep. All God's children.
Yeah.
I think one of the reason, I'm just theorizing here, but I think one of the reasons we're in such a mess, I don't mean us, as this group, I mean us generally as in the world, is that, we were all created in God's image. And God is a God of order, not so much a God of control, but a God of order. And so in our hearts or in our minds, in our being, we want order. And it's our desire to be orderly. But the problem is the way we ordered our society is based on Cain rather than God. So we follow after Cain and not after God, not after Abel, not after Adam, but after Cain. And so we have put things in order, that men are in charge, women are submissive, men are supposed to be the breadwinners, and women are supposed to stay home. And so this is the order that our societies, I think pretty much worldwide, have put in place to live an orderly life. But we're more complicated than that, and our order was not made after Cain. Our order was made after God, after Adam, after Abel, after Seth. And so we're longing for that, the right order, but we still want order. And unfortunately, we've modeled ourselves in the wrong order, still desiring that order. And God is showing us what the right order is.
Amen.
Amen. So I have a plan because next week we're going to go over gender, and I really do want everyone to try their best to find some articles that kind of see what you find that helps you understand gender identities, and gender roles and stereotyping. And we're going to go through that and try to be as thorough as we can. And after that, what I want to do, I don't know how you're all going to feel about this, but Elder Tess said that we can't just be looking in our own local areas, what kind of bad things are happening there. We have to have a worldwide mindset when it comes to inequality, and we have to see it everywhere. So my plan is we're going to take as many countries of the world as we can and divvy them up, and everyone gets to pick one and then present us with a little brief history of sexism and everything going on in that country at the time, and maybe over history. So that way it gets us all to kind of take our minds out of our immediate local area and look to, everywhere else, all the things that are happening, so we can get that mindset that Jesus has of all the inequality and seeing it all everywhere. How's that sound?
That sounds wonderful.
Did I capture that okay in the chat? Is that what you
Okay.
said?
Let me see, where is it? Yeah. So next week is just going to be that first line, gender identities and stereotypes. And then after that, at the end of that, we can make a list of countries, and then people can pick which one they want to do. And then we can start to go over. I don't know how many we can do in one day on one presentation, but we'll just try to get through them. But it's nice to kind of look at each country and see everything that's going on and how these inequalities are playing out everywhere, so that we can just be able to take everyone in everywhere all over this world, because our message is supposed to go to the entire planet, not just the United States. So we have to be familiar with everyone's suffering.
Yeah, because this is like was pointed out, that in the Millerite history, it was confined to the United States, and the message is worldwide. So this is happening in various forms in all different places in the world.
Yeah.
And the Lord is bringing it up to the surface in various places, depending on what their issue is in their culture, how to bring them out of cultural norms and to humanity.
Amen. Yeah. Okay, so I think we got a plan. If everyone's okay with that, we'll just do that afterwards. Does that sound good?
I'm in agreement. Everybody else?
Sounds
Majority.
good.
All right. By not saying anything, you're given a go ahead, I guess.
Susan asked if you would write out the assignment for next week.
Yes. So We're gonna look up,
It's
I
not a report next week, right? The
Not
report is for
what?
the following week. Is that correct?
yeah, starting the following week, because I don't think we're gonna be able to get through all the countries in one
Okay.
day. So it's just, what we're gonna do next week at the end is just put a list of countries up and people can pick which ones they want to do.
Okay.
So for next week, it's just gender,
Identity, stereotypes, and roles. Stereotyping and roles. Right?
stereotypes and roles. Yep. And this is specifically the issue where it's going to help us to understand, you know, the LGBTQ question and what their struggle is and what they have to deal with. So that's next week. That's just, I keep trying to make it bigger and I'm gonna keep.
Yeah, and that trans 101, I know that's helped me to understand a lot. I mean, it's a very, short, like 15-minute video. And, I don't know if anybody else watched it, but, this, he's a man now. I think his name is Chase.
Yeah, there's quite a few. He has quite a few videos.
Yeah, he has quite a few. And, all these struggle that he went through, he was a female before, now he's a man, but, he talks about the top surgery, and yet his bottom's still female. And it's like, wow, so they're all in like different transitional stages, but their mind is still who they are. So the chest is of a man, but the genitalia is of a woman, but their mind hasn't changed from who they were, 10, 20 years ago. So it's like, so I'm learning quite a bit from him.
Yeah.
It's very expensive to have those surgeries. I worked with back, gosh, it was 1976, and I was doing hair then, and I had a assistant, and I was young, right? I didn't understand that my assistant, nobody really talked about those things either, and I didn't realize my assistant was going through a sex change. I just knew my assistant seemed like an odd-looking girl. Like she was really tall and she had beautiful hair, but like the build just looked odd. But it never occurred to me that it was a man going through surgery to become a woman. And she even had her forehead like injected, because as we began to talk about these things over time, like in the break room, she started revealing that she had, in fact, she was even married to a man and they had met in the Navy. And she was having her forehead like made to puff out kind of more like a woman's would. I mean, she was going through extensive surgeries, but the genitalia part of the surgery is like a difficult choice, I guess, because they don't know whether it's even going to work properly. Maybe they've come a lot further since those years, but yeah, it's quite an ordeal.
They've gotten better at the surgeries, but the problem is that it is expensive, and I don't think it's covered under insurance. I'm not sure, but when it comes to a class issue, then people who are not well off, they can't afford to look like who they feel inside. And that's a lot of times they'll do things that look strange to people. I was listening to a TED Talk where this lady was she couldn't afford anything to do with her hair. She was really poor, so she wore t-shirts on her head to kind of take the place of what long hair would be. And she got beaten up, bullied to no end, and abused and raped. She got kicked out of her house, had to turn to sex work to survive, and got to the point where she was really saying, I either turn this around somehow now, or I'm going to just kill myself because I can't deal with this anymore. I can't do this. It hurts so much to live. And it's just, it's so hard to listen how much pain
I think it's one of the things that was in Obamacare. Maybe somebody can, maybe somebody else knows about that. I'm pretty sure it was one of the things that was fought through Obamacare, that the far right were totally against that being in there, and health insurance paying for the transition. And
Yeah.
the surgery.
Yeah. So next week we'll get to go into that, and I can't wait because there's a lot there. It's a really interesting topic, and there's a lot of struggle there. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and pray and close this off if that's all right.
Okay.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for that study that we were able to do. Thank you for helping us to see an even deeper level into sexism and the damage that it causes to men and women, to everyone, a part of every community. Everyone is struggling, Lord, because of the system of oppression that has been implemented and been a part of our consciousness for so long. Lord, it's difficult even for us now, even though we've been looking at this, trying to become aware, trying to change. It's so deeply embedded in every single one of us that we struggle to put it out, and we need your help. Help us to see anything in us that's still left. Help us, Lord, to be able to recognize around us when we're thinking something wrong or judging a situation in a way that has bias involved. Help us to learn from every one of those situations so we can grow and do better. And help us, Lord, to be compassionate and keep all the struggles of all of these people before our minds constantly, so that we'll be drawn to their difficulties and have empathy and compassion towards them. And in our group, help us all to come together on this issue in unity so that we can do a very good job in going forward and be prepared for anything that may come our way. We thank you so much for this beautiful Sabbath day and this fellowship, and for all the growth we've experienced. And we pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.